If your legacy could be 10 times bigger than your wildest dreams? I'd like to welcome Aurora Winter to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely Friday. Welcome, Aurora.
It's great to be here with you.
It is my pleasure to host you, and I believe you're joining from the lovely city of Los Angeles in the United States of America.
Yep, beautiful Los Angeles. Love it here. My background's in film and television. Now I'm in publishing and all about books, but they do relate to legacy. So I'd love to really encourage the listeners to lean in and listen in, maybe even take some notes, because we're going to talk about how your legacy could be 10 times bigger than you imagined in your wildest dreams.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Okay, we'll jump into the first question. Many accomplished founders, executives, as well as entrepreneurs spend decades, years accumulating their wisdom, their TI, time in their business experience, but never document it. Why do so many of these individuals underestimate the value of their own intellectual capital as well as emotional capital?
Yeah, I think this is so tragic. We get so trapped in a capitalist society of thinking that all of the value is captured in the balance sheet and in the income statement. And that's just not true. Like, if you have lived decades or more, you've got pattern recognition, you've got stories, you've got wisdom, and you could pass that on to other people, but they're not going to learn that if you hand them your balance sheet or you hand them your prospectus, right? How people remember and how people learn is through stories. So, one of the things I love to encourage people to do is, hey, where's your book? I've been coached and mentored by so many people who were already dead when I read their book, but their book changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life. So now I'm talking about maybe your impact could be 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times bigger than you think. A book is so cool. Somebody can buy a book for $20 and it can sit on the shelf for 100 years after the person's dead, 1,000 years after they're dead. I was reading Tao Te Ching this morning, right? 2,000 years later, it can still impact people. But if you want an impact closer to home that could 10x your revenue or more, you have systems, you have blueprints, you have pattern recognition, you have stories, and you could reach many more people than you currently are. You can actually, by putting that in a book, you can sell your business for more because all of a sudden it becomes a much more powerful brand, or you can use your book to attract clients, which is what most of my clients do. They use their book to share the difference that they help people make, what they're about. Somebody gets a $20 book, and before you know it, they're investing 50 or $100,000 in the next step. That is a good return on investment. So that's just a little taste of a few different ways that your legacy could be 10 times bigger than you're currently imagining.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you have a copy of your book. If you'd like to hold it up for our
I
listeners.
do. I have a copy of my
Okay.
book, Turn Words into Wealth. 7 different ways to make 7 figures as a thought leader. Actually, I have it as a gift for the audience. They can get the hardcover book at turnwordsintowealth.com. Absolutely free. They just cover shipping and they get Turn Words into Wealth, the audiobook, the ebook, a workbook, and the hardcover book
Yeah.
just for shipping.
So I want to bring up something on page 57, and I only bring this up because I was having a conversation in the last couple of weeks with a affluent individual that doesn't have to work anymore, and I brought up his legacy, and I almost wonder if perhaps if he were to distill his knowledge, and he has a lot of intellectual capital as well as emotional capital, if it might be to inspire someone else, including his children.
Yeah.
And so I go to page 57 where you talk about four irreplaceable assets in this world of AI. Do you want to speak into this?
Yeah, I think this is so important. This is why I updated my book and just came out. The new version came out a couple of months ago because I think AI is changing everything and we can pretend it's not happening or we can lean into it. So there are 4 things that AI cannot compete with, and one of them is your stories. So nobody else has your stories. AI can produce generic stories or average stories, but you are the only one who has your stories. And I include, your mad midnight moments, the time where you're like, oh no, how am I going to meet payroll? The time where you pleaded at the bank for an extension on your line of credit, the time when your credit card company called, whatever. Those mad midnight moments, the moments where things almost went off the rails, are part of your story. They're part of the DNA of whatever you have built. Even if something went bankrupt, I think most people make the mistake in their marketing that they only share the highlights. They only share the moments of celebration or success, but they don't share how they got there and all the missteps. And that is what makes a hero's journey. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm a former TV writer producer. We love movies about, the underdog, the struggle, and the final triumph, sort of Rocky, right? But if we just showed Sylvester Stallone winning, I mean, that's not a story. So lean into your stories, collect your stories and the stories of the other of people whose lives you have touched or transformed. So that's the first one. The second thing is your style. So, in the past, when we lived in small towns, we didn't want to be the tall poppy. We wanted to look like everybody else and sound like everybody else. And today, we're living in the worldwide economy. So, lean into what's unique and special about you. What's your style? What's your political leanings? Even, how do you dress? How do you exercise? What's your morning routine? What's your faith? I think now is the time to actually be more bold, be more badass and bold, and lean into sharing your style. In Turn Words into Wealth, I share a story of a young man in his 20s in England, and Pinsent is his name, and he only wears period clothing. He doesn't wear any jeans or any t-shirts. Jack Pinsent McLeod, and or Jack McLeod Pinsent, and BBC covered him because that's kind of weird, right? And it got millions of views. I think 6 million views on the little BBC featuring him. Well, now his business is actually making handmade bespoke clothing for the five other people on the planet who only want to wear period clothing. I'm exaggerating. It's obviously more than five because he's got a very successful business. That's an example of he really leaned into being bold and having his style. But I think many people lean into hiding their style. So don't do that. If you want to succeed in the age of AI, generic is dead. You don't want to be average. You don't want to be mediocre. You want to be you. And then the third one is your smile, by which I mean your presence. AI will never replace human connection. People need people. People thrive being seen, being heard. People are starving for somebody to listen to them. So they're starving for your smile. So don't underestimate the value of going to see somebody at their office, meeting for a coffee, having lunch or dinner, or connecting like we are right now on Zoom. And then your fourth human superpower, I call Socrates. So 2,000 years after his death drinking hemlock, Socrates is still famous today for asking powerful questions. So ask powerful questions. That's the best way. You're a coach. You know that if you ask somebody a challenging question and then they think about it for a minute, it can actually change the course of their life. But if you give them the answer, they probably will have forgotten it an hour later. But if you wait patiently and let them struggle to find the answer, you're actually helping them rewire their brain. They build new neural pathways, they build myelin. So be Socrates. Ask powerful questions of other people, of yourself, and even of LLMs. Don't be passive. Don't be waiting to get the answer handed to you. Instead, ask powerful questions. So, those are four human superpowers that we all can lean into: stories, style, smile, and Socrates.
Yeah, I think it's great. I bring that up because one of the things your book covers is how AI can easily take out the middle or what is the deemed commodities. You brought up milk, for instance, but if somebody's service or product is too generic and they don't
Yeah.
become an expert, but a part of becoming that expert is leaning in. And I said to you in our preamble this morning, it's so interesting because it does require a little bit of vulnerability and that self-reflection.
Yeah, exactly. People hunger for that vulnerability, and that is usually captured in a powerful story, right? People don't remember or really connect with statistics, or they don't really connect with lists of 10 things to do. And here, I'll prove it to you. How many of the 10 commandments can you reel off? I'm not going to put you on the spot, but most people, just listeners, audience, just think for a second, how many of the 10 commandments can you reel off? And then how many stories from the Bible can you reel off? And most
Mm,
people who are from a Christian background find that they can remember a lot more stories: the parting of the Red Sea, rising from the tomb, Christ on the
mhm,
cross.
mhm.
They
Daniel
can
in the den.
exactly, they can remember a whole bunch of stories, but they struggle to even get the Ten Commandments. And this is a mistake that many people make with their marketing and their messaging. They try to distill it down to something like a list, like the Ten Commandments, but instead take a bit more time and tell the story. And then the fifth human superpower, which is a meta power, which it really relates to what you do, It's what is the legacy that you want to leave? What is the difference that you want to make in the world? What do you want to have on your tombstone? How do you want to be remembered? At your celebration of life, what do you want people to be saying about you? Because AI will never replace that. AI is a great servant, but don't let it be the master. You need to keep control of your own destiny and thinking about your legacy, thinking about fast forward, I'm sorry, but thinking about that you're not here forever is the best way to lead a meaningful life today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me bring up the stakes for a moment. So, what are the opportunities, but also what are the risks if somebody chooses to not consider a legacy asset of their thought leadership, their
Yeah.
stories?
I think that things are changing so rapidly with AI. The middle of the market is dying. So using yesterday metaphorically, yesterday it used to be enough to be good at whatever you do, to be a good lawyer, to be a good accountant, to be a good legacy planner,
Mhm.
to be a good fill in the blank was enough. It's not going to be going forward. AI is commoditizing everything. If you are an expert or could be perceived as an expert or a leader, now is the time to step into that because otherwise you're just going to drown in generic AI content. And you don't want to compete with China, with Walmart, or with AI. So AI is very good at many things and it's good at spitting out generic content very quickly. It's good at crunching numbers. But what is AI? It's really
It's a language model.
it's an autocomplete.
Mm.
It's basically an autocomplete. So what is autocomplete? It's going to be the next average sentence, the next most likely word. So by definition, if you're using autocomplete, well, you can be replaced by autocomplete if you're average and you choose to hide. And I think there is a great danger for professionals, experts, leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals, if they don't take action now. I think 2026 is the time to take action. There's a window of opportunity right now. And here's the good news. If you act now, you can become the expert that LLMs like ChatGPT quote
Mhm.
instead of the one it replaces. So Amazon is the number three search engine.
Mhm.
YouTube is the number two search engine. So I have a YouTube channel called Strategic Basics. I've got 10 books on Amazon. So what happens if you put my name into Google or into an LLM, you say, Aurora Winter author, who is she? What's her book Turn Words into Wealth about? It will give you a whole bunch of information because the LLMs recognize me. Why? Because they source Amazon, they source Goodreads, they source and respect authors, right? So that's a little secret there. You can sort of not cheat the system, but play with the system.
Mhm.
LLMs are not so interested in stories, but they're interested in credibility. So, how can you tip the scale on becoming the recognized expert to LLMs? One of the ways is to have a published book on Amazon and then get reviews on Goodreads and then have a podcast or appear as a guest expert on podcasts. All of these things cumulatively add to your brand. But then you want to also be very careful not to just be like every other XYZ. You want to lead with what's unique about you and about the people that you serve.
And what you know.
And
Like,
what you know, it's going to be the 80-20 rule. So 20% of the people will get 80% of the business. So how do you want to position yourself to be in that top 20%?
you mentioned a story in your book about Mel Robbins and 5 4 3 2 1, which was, I think, a NASA rocket launch, but she connected to that story or the moment in her life when she was in bankruptcy and not wanting to get out of bed. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, isn't that interesting? If not bankruptcy, how many people have been in that moment of like, not wanting to get up that morning for whatever reason? And yet she said 5 4 3 2 1.
I love that story because it actually illustrates two important things that you're touching upon there. One, she didn't invent the NASA countdown. Millions of people had heard the 5 4 3 2 1 countdown. So she didn't own it. She didn't invent it. It wasn't a big secret before she noticed it because a lot of people had heard the NASA countdown. But the other thing she combined that with was she was very willing to be transparent and authentic. You
About her
know,
struggle that moment.
about her struggle at that moment. She was drinking too much. She and her husband were on the verge of bankruptcy. The bill collectors were calling. They couldn't pay the bill collectors. They'd overextended. I think they had opened a second restaurant. First restaurant did great. The second one was too much, something like that. And so she had just retreated into drinking. And when she watched the NASA liftoff the day before, she's like, I can do that. She counted down five, four, three, two, one. And then she forced herself to get out of bed on one. And it was a small moment, but it was a tipping point in her life. And then she told more stories about it. When she posted about it, people really responded. And then she wrote a book
Yeah.
about it later. But I love that example because so many people who come to me and want to work with Same Page Publishing or want to get my help with their book, they're like, well, I don't have anything original. It doesn't have to be original.
It's the human experience of
Yeah,
how did you build or rebuild?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Especially with entrepreneurs who always have to be building and rebuilding and adjusting and rebuilding and have
exactly.
those moments of, you know, it could be silent desperation or it could be not so silent desperation.
Yeah. In fact, I can tell a moment of my own silent desperation or not so silent desperation. That's kind of a fun story. So I was known as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy. I'm a young widow. My husband died suddenly when I was 31 and he was 33. So I launched the Grief Coach Academy. I've written a number of books about grief and resilience, and that was great for about a decade. And then I just hit the wall. I'm like, I don't want to talk about grief for the rest of my life. I want to talk about something else. I felt I had done my bit to make a difference to grieving people. But then I'm like, now what? Like I have a successful business. I'm known as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy. I needed to pivot to something new. So what I did is I did a 90-day experiment. I'm like, people were asking me, how did they basically use these words? How did you fast track your marketing? How did you write so many books, get on TV, get on radio? And I'm like, maybe people would like my help with that. So I wrote a really short book based on a 1 hour interview. Here's the book here. It's called Marketing Fast Track: How I Made $250,000 in 90 Days Using This Short Book. And people can get this book for free at marketingfasttrack.com. Um, and anyway, so that's what I did. I spent $12,000 in advertising and attracted $250,000 of new business. Now, just to be clear, I didn't sell $250,000 of books. I gave people the book for free. They just covered shipping. And I attracted, people who wanted help with their messaging, their marketing, their $1 million message, with publishing a book. So $250,000 in 90 days was great. But what was even more valuable to me was, oh, I have proof of concept. I have proof that, yes, people do want my help and I can shift from the Grief Coach Academy to Same Page Publishing. So that was a huge thing for me. So you don't always have to spend a year writing a book. Sometimes you can do something quick and
Mhm.
test the market.
Mhm.
Make sure that there is demand for what you're thinking.
Yeah, what I liked about, and you said this in, you wrote about in your book here, Turn Words into Wealth, that a part of it is writing down what it is only you know. And it
Yeah.
reminded me of this, the last page of Oprah Winfrey's magazine, and it was called What I Know for Sure, where
Yeah.
she self-reflected and she shared something. Well, this is what I know for sure. And I think because you had worked in the space of marketing, you basically downloaded your stories, your knowledge, your wisdom, which brings me to my next question.
Okay.
Yes, what makes authentic human wisdom more valuable than ever today?
Yeah. I think we are drowning in information. We're drowning in data. We're drowning in average. But people are hungry for somebody who's been there, done that, got the scars and the
Mhm.
t-shirt, and would be willing to talk them through their particular situation.
Well, I think they want answers.
Yeah,
So
they
if you
want
lived it, you got the firsthand wisdom.
exactly. And I don't know about you, but you can put almost any question into ChatGPT or other LLMs, and it will give you an answer, but it won't give you wisdom. And it could send you in completely the wrong direction, because it's just autocomplete. It's pulling from all kinds of posts everywhere else. And as we go forward, those posts that it's pulling from, we're also going to be written by AI. So garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's why people are hungry for coaches or mentorship or masterminds because they actually want to know, hey, what happened when you did this? Or I have this idea. Is that a good idea? Or, like you can learn, you don't have time in life to make all of the mistakes. So if you talk to somebody who's in your business or has similar goals and aspirations and found out what worked for them, what didn't work, it's going to save you so much time and money.
Yeah, I think also human nature and the human population today needs guidance.
Yeah.
We're not going to just get that from an AI video on TikTok,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. I also think that the information economy is dead. I think it's all about the transformation economy.
Mm,
People are hungry for transformation. They will invest in transformation. Information is basically free, and it's very hard to filter the good information from the bad information if you're just online.
mm,
But one of the reasons why I've got the Strategic Basics YouTube channel, it's focusing on breaking news. And I chose to focus on breaking news to business breakthroughs instead of information
mm.
because I'm like, breaking news is always happening and people are always hungry for, oh, let's have a little human perspective on what's happening in the breaking news. I'm like, I can be the face of that. Certain people will enjoy that. Whereas just being the face of how to publish, how to publish, how to publish, how to become a best-selling author, that would get boring for me. And seeing as I'm a creative entrepreneur, I can't be bored. That's not good.
Yeah. So let's say that an entrepreneur comes to you and they say, Aurora, I'd like to write that book and create that legacy asset. What is it that they need to know starting day one regarding the challenges as well as the rewards?
What I do with people is first we work for about a month together and take a deep dive, and I'm calling it the brand strategy overview. As you know, I like this word showrunner because of my background in film and television. So, a showrunner is the person who oversees a TV series. So, they're not necessarily writing every episode or being the director or producer of every episode or even being may sometimes appear as cast in the episode, but the showrunner keeps an eye on the overall vision for the whole series and is also responsible for each episode. So that's what I do for brands is I keep an eye on the overall vision. So our first month together when people work with me is like a look at what are we trying to do here? If everything went beautifully with your brand, your book, your YouTube channel, your videos, your message, what would be the outcome? And then we reverse engineer it to make sure that we can achieve that. So usually we make sure that people are getting a 10x return on their investment in writing a book. So if somebody's investing $5,000 a month in writing a book, then I want to make sure that they have a reasonable expectation of $50,000 revenue a month coming in once their book is done. And that's not that hard to do.
Good, good. I'm wondering about the challenges of it. I'm reminded of because you've had some amazing success with some of the clients you've worked with, attorneys and so forth that have created different books, even a series. But I almost wonder about that Brene Brown moment of after she did that first talk and she had that brown outfit on, and now
Oh,
everyone knew her in that brown outfit. And
oh my gosh,
that's great. She was
she
right. She
got
was
such
that
haters
professor.
with that.
What's that? Go ahead.
She got such haters commenting on her
Oh, they
outfit.
clowned on her, but she was supposed to be like that nutty professor, and she had the brown outfit on. But her message went viral as one. I think it's still in one of the top 10 TEDx talks,
Yeah,
talking about that in the Western society, particularly in the United States of America, we are the most over medicated. Doesn't matter if it's shopping or medic or pills or whatever it is. And I mean, it touched a nerve. It touched a
yeah,
chord. But
yeah,
but she made this joke afterwards that she met with one of her college girlfriends and they're having lunch or whatever, coffee, and she said, I can't take that back. It's now published.
yeah,
It's now out there forever.
yeah. And I think she said she had to eat ice cream and just, be inside for the whole weekend watching replays of Downton Abbey or something to get over the haters who were commenting on her outfit. But yeah, she changed the world. She changed how we think about vulnerability. So of course she had to have the shame moment with vulnerability. But yeah, there's power in vulnerability. So I guess you were asking if
Well, I
if
think
my
about
clients struggle with that.
well, the challenge once you get the visibility, you can't go back inside of the box.
That's right. You
Yeah.
cannot. You're a star now.
And you talked about that when somebody decides to publish a book Particularly, I think one of the notes I wrote to ahead of time, it's like moving beyond authorship and why authorship matters to focusing on how thought leadership becomes that legacy asset. So all of a sudden, if they have a little bit of star power, you can't go back in the box. Not that somebody, is going to recognize you or I in the grocery store, but what if they did?
Well, even a little bit of star power makes a huge difference, especially within your niche or within, your industry.
Mhm.
So as you were mentioning, I talked about my client, Michael Stockham, who's a litigation attorney. And when companies are considering who to hire as a litigation attorney, there's some pretty high-powered lawyers that they're considering, but
Mhm.
he's the only one who's a best-selling, award-winning author of legal thrillers.
Mhm.
So they're like, well, let's hire him. He's going to be good. He's going to do a great job, and he's
He's
interesting.
interesting.
And so he's gotten seven-figure contracts doing legal work as a litigation attorney because he has a brand. He's appeared on podcasts, he speaks, and he's got award-winning books. They're selling really well, by the way. He's got
Mhm.
over 3 million page reads and I think 3,000 reviews on Amazon. So his books
Mhm.
are great.
Mhm.
But yeah, so you don't have to be recognized by everybody for it to make a difference because when they're comparing a half a dozen people to solve a particular problem and you stand out as the only one who's got a podcast, got a book, got something going on, they're like, well, if everybody else is the same, and then you've got an award-winning book, they're like, well, of course we're going to hire her. Also, they will remember you when you meet with potential clients and hand them a copy of your autographed book, and they're like,
Mhm.
oh, they take it back on the plane and they read it on the plane and they put it on their bookshelf. And then when they're thinking about, oh, legacy planning, there's your book. And it's like a silent little salesperson reminding them about you. So there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was told at least 5 years ago or more, your book will become your business card. Wonderful. I still like the idea of a business card. Thank you. Go down to FedEx office and print it out for $30. I'm just making a joke. I'm being humorous. Okay. So let me put you on the spot a little bit with this next question, which I'm going to pull it out to a broader context. It has to do with multiple forms of capital, but we are at the very beginning of this, what they call this great wealth transfer for the next 20 years. And I saw a short video this morning as the sun was coming up, and it was about how out of that 84 trillion or whatever that number is, it depends on if somebody's looking at it globally or just in the United States of America, but 55% will go to millennials and the rest to Generation Z. So on this podcast, we often talk about multiple forms of capital,
Mm.
whether that's relational, social, reputational, emotional, financial, intellectual, et cetera. So how can the thought leadership turn into legacy IP, strengthen all of these forms of wealth for both that individual as well as, let's say, if they have children that are Gen Z or millennials?
Yeah. Well, it's not just about your book, it's about capturing your systems
Mhm.
so that anytime you capture a system, even if it's a standard operating procedure that's on a Google Doc, that's something, right? But
Mhm.
if you can capture your process, your systems, your thinking, you're going to be adding value. So that company I told you about before, the Grief Coach Academy, I basically had abandoned it because I was like, okay, I'm moving on to this new thing. And I thought, well, I can't sell that business. It's dead. I mean, it's dormant. It's been
May
years.
may I interrupt
But
you for a moment?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
I wanted to say something as I was going through this book, and you were talking about the Grief Academy and how naysayers came up to you and they said, well, it can't be done, or I've had
Right.
6 to 8 years of therapy. And you said, no, 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 I've got my real life experience and I've condensed it now into this blueprint or this template or this system. This is what worked for me. Let me be the guide and walk you and hold your hand through what I call the path in the forest to the canoe by the lake, because is what worked for me. And so I realize I'm interrupting you right now. So if I think about this great wealth transfer and all of particularly women that are going to be the heirs, whether that's succession or inheritance, et cetera, and they cannot read a balance sheet or a profit and loss statement or realize that profit is more important than revenue, then all of a sudden, if somebody could just distill that, what you would call the SOP, the standard operating procedure, then how much less pain that recipient, that beneficiary will be in when all of a sudden they receive some transfer and they're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And they expect it to know, but they don't know.
Yeah. So,
And
so
who do they
exactly
go to
right.
for the answer? Sorry.
So anticipate that they'll need help. So give training wheels.
Mhm.
So the training wheels can be for your children or your grandchildren or the new shareholders, but they can also help you perhaps sell a business. So I
Mhm.
was going to give the example of the Grief Coach Academy because I wasn't thinking about my legacy enough early enough. I hadn't hired you to help me think it through. I more or less just stopped doing the Grief Coach Academy and went on to doing same page publishing, which is how I help people now with their message. And so then later I'm like, well, that was stupid. I should have sold that business because it was going, right? I had a
Mhm.
whole thing. But actually, I did sell that business. And here is why. I was able to sell that business because I have several books. There's Grief Relief in 30 Minutes, which walks through just one of the coaching processes we did at the Grief Coach Academy called the Peace Method. I also had the Grief Relief Workbook, which was basically the handouts that I would give people at events and
Mhm.
that the coaches who were trained at the Grief Coach Academy could use that workbook with their clients. So they would walk through the different coaching processes. And I had videos training coaches how to do every single step with the videos recorded with me just explaining it in a 15-minute video. But then I had hour-long videos with clients and students on the line asking questions. I had transcripts, I had PDFs, I had like basically training wheels. So
Mhm.
somebody else who actually wanted to help people through grief, who was a great person, she trained with me. I actually met her. I just handed her my book because there was a murder in her family. Her brother was murdered.
Mhm.
We connected. Anyway, she is now running the Grief Coach Academy. So this is part of really putting your arms around. If you were dead tomorrow, how would somebody else run this business? And if you can turn that into a system with a book, with workbooks, with videos, with
Thought
your
leadership.
YouTube channel, with thought leadership, exactly, then you help them, but you also probably increase the value 10x. If I hadn't had all of those pieces, the Grief Coach Academy wouldn't have been sellable.
Yeah, I'm going to belabor this point for a moment before we move on to my
Okay.
next question,
All right. All
which
right.
is you took one of the most painful moments of your life, similar to Mel Robbins in 5 4 3 2 1, because people can think, oh, how did I get into bankruptcy? Other than, I mean, Donald Trump is like the king of bankruptcy, and good for him because he mastered it. So I don't think he's got any shame around if he's got
Yeah.
multiple entities and they've all gone BK into bankruptcy. But I think for Mel Robbins, there was an emotion tied to it. Just as
Yeah.
when you dealt with grief, it was probably one of the most painful moments of your life. And here is how you broke through to the other side, because like Mel Robbins, life can be messy, and who do you ask and where do you go, and do you just buy into some line that it's going to take 6 to 8 years? Like, no
Yeah.
way. People don't want to stay in the valley for 6 to 8 years. And I bring that up because many times when there is a wealth transfer, what happens, and Jay Hughes has talked about this on my podcast, he's an attorney and he's advised the Rockefeller family. He said what happens is people become frozen in PTSD
Yeah. Yeah.
because they end up living in nice houses and they drive nice cars, but they stay frozen because where is that standard operating procedure of, well, congratulations, you now have been given something and it is amazing. Yes, that is true. But you need all these other forms of capital. If not, that person is going to say, like, I'm expected to know, but I just don't know. And now
Yeah.
I'm also dealing with the grief of the person
Yep.
that passed.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And like studies show, this book Happiness, who went into it and did a great study, people on average suffer 6 to 8 years from a devastating loss. It could be the loss of a parent, loss of a child, but it could also be the loss of a community, like people who get kicked out of their church, the loss of a
Mm-hmm.
sense of identity,
Mm-hmm.
like a woman who wants to be a mother and keeps having miscarriages. So many different kinds of losses can create a sudden trough of
Mm-hmm.
happiness for 6 to 8 years. And that's why when people told me, you can't coach people through grief, I'm like, I have just coached people through grief for the past year. And I have helped these women, on the same week. This was one of those God moments. Because if the same thing happens several times, I'm like, okay, that might be a message from the big guy. The same thing happened in one week. One of my clients that I was working with one-on-one coaching them through grief, they like, you helped me more in that one session than my therapist has helped me in the past 2 years, or in
Mm-hmm.
my past, or the therapist has helped me in the past 6 months. And I love my therapist. They were not dissing their therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
they said, can you teach me how to coach people like you? I'm like, okay. And then I started the Grief Coach Academy. And that's why, like, for the people, for the audience, like your toughest moment your hardest thing might be a clue for the biggest legacy that you could leave. Because I had suffered so much when I was grieving, and because I knew that if people just waited, I mean, I hate that myth, it just takes time. No. If you just wait, it's going to take you 5 to 8 years to get over it.
Mhm.
Instead, if you lean into it and do various processes, which you can read about in Grief Relief in 30 minutes, if you do this journaling process for 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes at most a day, it will gradually help you release the grief and come back. I, okay, one more thing on this. Grief is this side of the hand,
Mhm.
and love is this side.
Mm.
So why would you ever want to get over grief? It's just the other side of your hand. So the whole idea of getting over grief is wrong. Instead, we can appreciate the grief is just part of love. And if you completely erased grief, you would completely erase your ability to feel and experience love. So we don't want to get over it. Instead, we want to transcend it and be grateful for it. So anyway, bit of
Thank
a
you. Thank you. It's
bit
just
of
a
a
very human moment because life is painful sometimes and it's messy. But if you can relieve someone of their pain, then whoo, they will be grateful if they don't have to sit in that for 6 to 8 years of what I call Groundhog Day, because time is that one asset that is non-renewable.
And I think you're really right. This is a big part of the legacy process because people will be dealing with grief at the same time that they are being asked to step up into a bigger role. This is where, like, I think actually working on your book with somebody like myself, who's a grief coach, can be helpful because even if you never publish the book, just the process of having somebody who cares listen deeply to all of the things that happen to you in your life with the goal of writing a book that will help you and help others and help your business, it changes your identity. It really, as I ask people, like I'm working on a book with a client who's an AI expert, but we were talking about his childhood yesterday. I'm like, well, what happened then? And what happened then? And what, like all these stories came up and they will make his book better. But your identity can change as you work on claiming your story.
Absolutely. I think it's a new perspective when there's a witness such as
Yeah.
yourself. So, what is important to know regarding nuances if, let's say, an entrepreneur, an expert, whoever would like to monetize their knowledge?
Oh yeah. This makes me so mad. This is so important. I have so many people who are like, I want to write a book and it's going to be about this and it's going to change these people. And I'm like, okay, after people have read your book, then what? And most people don't even have any answer. And
Mhm.
honestly, I made this mistake with my first book, which is called From Heartbreak to Happiness, because I didn't think through, I wasn't thinking of it from a business point of view. And that's why in Turn Words into Wealth, I wrote about the 7 different ways to monetize your message.
Mhm.
If you solve a problem, why not solve it at a profit? And then you can keep doing it. Nothing wrong with having a nonprofit or wanting to give. But if you're paying for everything, it's a hobby.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're at least in the black, then it's a business. And if it's a business, then you can afford to reach millions of people. Where if it's a hobby, you can probably reach 25.
Mhm.
So I really urge people to think about after people have the benefit of all the knowledge in your book, and you don't have to withhold anything, a certain percentage of people, maybe 10%, 5%, will want more. They'll want your personal help with their legacy plan. They'll want my help launching their book and launching their YouTube channel. Okay, so just let people know how to do that. So like in Turn Winds into Wealth, there's a QR code. It sends you to bookcall.biz and you can book an in-depth call with me and we can go from there. So think it through. How else can you serve people? Do you want to be a speaker? Are you a coach? Are you a consultant? Are you selling something? And what is the next step so that you can make it easy for people to take that next step?
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think it's important. And the piggyback off of that, I think oftentimes people would like to build a business and be able to walk away. So, how can they then, I guess, build the business? And I think your answer is what's the next ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking through it, 7 layers, 7
And
steps,
and
taking
and
yourself
here
path forward.
And here's a good metaphor, I think, a good way to think about it is you don't have to withhold from your book at all, but your book should solve one problem and it should solve it thoroughly. But
Mhm.
for example, the book What to Expect When You're Expecting
Mhm.
solves the problem of, well, what's going to happen? I'm pregnant.
Mhm.
What do I expect in month 3 and month 6, etc. Okay, so you can thoroughly solve what to expect when you're expecting with that book. But
Mhm.
then what? The baby is born. What to expect in the first year, what to expect when you're nursing, what to expect, when kindergarten, what to expect when you're trying to send your kid to college. There's always another problem. So you don't have to withhold solving a problem in your book, but there are some things that just are not well solved in a book. They
Mhm.
require a video, they require a consultation because you need to tailor it to that particular person. Like you were talking about before we started recording, I found this very interesting. You were talking about 7 different models, really, for a legacy, which was really
Oh,
interesting.
layers. Yeah.
Seven different layers. Yeah.
Having net worth.
So that would be interesting for somebody to read in a book. Oh, if I'm at this net worth, this is what I need to do. But if I'm at twice that net worth, I need to do this other thing. And then at a certain point, they're just going to be, can you just help me design my legacy? Right?
Well, I think a part of that is also because when people don't know something, and if they advance to this next level of wealth, let's say, there was I always is it Dr. Jim Grubman? I can't remember the name. I always struggle with the name of the author. He's out of Connecticut. He's a therapist, a psychologist, and he wrote this book called Strangers in Paradise. And what he said is when somebody becomes successful or affluent, it's like they move to this island and then they don't
Mm.
want to get kicked off of the island. So what is it that they need to know to stay on the island? And I thought
Right.
about similarly, if somebody moves up but they don't know what's expected of them, or how do they fly on a private charter jet, or how do they, what's the next thing that's expected in their behavior or conduct, because 2/3 of today's affluent are self-made, they don't know. But if they don't want
Yeah.
to get kicked off of the island, then
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but that's why it's taking my sweet
And
time.
also, this is a very good example that you're bringing up because there can be costs of making mistakes.
Well, of
And
course.
sometimes the cost can be, um, well, not
Reputational,
completely irrecoverable, but reputational.
social.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So if you just don't want to have mud on your face, it's going to be worth somebody to invest in whatever they need to do to make sure they don't get kicked off the island. Or, for example, in Turn Words into Wealth, I talk people through here's 7 different ways to make 7 figures with your book. Here are 10 different things you need to do to launch as a thought leader. And by the time people have read all that, they can go and do it.
Hmm.
But a lot of people are like, that is complicated. Can you just help me?
Hmm.
Right? Because
Oh,
you,
absolutely. They
yeah,
absolutely. It's sometimes it can be information overload, and they'll say, or just hold my hand, just get me to the
yeah,
finish line. And then I
yeah.
don't have to think about the 10,000 words or whatever it
Like
is.
my heart bleeds for all of the people who have got a self-published book on Amazon with 2 reviews and
Hmm.
a cover that looks like a teenager made it.
Hmm.
Like probably the content of the book is good, but the presentation is not top notch.
Hmm.
And all of my clients become #1 best-selling authors and they all win awards, knock on wood, because we have a process, we have a system.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about ideas that can become assets. So normally people think of an estate as financial assets, but you have brought up um, the value of a brand, for instance. So
Mhm.
ideas can become assets as well. So how can individuals as well as families intentionally build an intellectual estate that preserves their values, experiences, and wisdom?
Yeah. Well, books are the leading way to do that because a book is one of the assets that doesn't it ages well, like a
Like a
10-year-old
bottle of wine.
a 10-year-old book, right? So I think of YouTube as like a newspaper. So the newspaper or the magazine is great, but you don't really want to read a month-old magazine, right? But I think if you combine one legacy book, for example, James Clear, he's got a book, Atomic Habits. It took him 10 years to write another book, which was Atomic Habits Workbook, right? But then to combine one good book with light touches. So James Clear is famous for his email, which keeps in touch. Most people, I think, will benefit from something like YouTube is the #2 search engine, having your face out there on video. So I think one legacy asset book and
Mhm.
then your videos. Now, if you are planning the next step, like for example, my son works with me and we have the YouTube channel Strategic Basics. He does all the editing. I'm going to be in Australia next week and I said, "Okay, it's time for you to step up on camera I'm passing the baton. So he's like, whoa, okay, I can do this. So why not lean into giving people opportunities before you croak?
Absolutely.
Yeah, to build them. And that's, building legacy in a living, breathing human being. That's
Mhm.
also part of your legacy.
I think it's really important. The point that you just made, I have brought up many times the founder, Bernard Arnault of LVMH. He has engaged all five of his children, all five of his adult children. They come from two marriages, and he's got them at that dining room table practically every night. And they run
Mm,
five divisions, but he has got them engaged. And I think that is what has to happen. It has to be hands on. You've got to invite them and
yeah.
continue to invite them and train them up. Because if you don't train them up, somebody else will. And will they have the best intentions for your child the way that you do?
And maybe loosen up on the control because sometimes they have a different idea. Let them run with it.
Mhm.
Try it out. Give them 90 days to prove it.
Mhm.
It was my son's idea to call our YouTube channel Strategic Basics, and we got that little,
Mm.
YouTube plaque now.
Thank you,
And I'm
son.
like, yeah, that's my son. And I'm like, well, are you sure we shouldn't call it Turn Words into Wealth? Because that's my brand. I'm like, he's like, no, we're going to do breaking news to business breakthroughs. I'm like, yeah. And we got 170,000 subscribers. So yeah, I think that worked.
Cool, cool. Okay, so let me bring up documenting ideas in
All right.
books, podcasts, etc. So let's say it can become a part of a succession strategy. So
Absolutely.
is that because that's the breadcrumbs, or what are the benefits? And have you seen it work well? What say you on this question?
Um, I think it's firstly, can you systematize what you're doing? Because if you can't, then you're going to be the bottleneck. If
Mhm.
you're always deciding everything, yeah, you're going to be the bottleneck. So yes, when you're just starting something, maybe the first 90 days or the first year, you're still figuring it out, so you're a bit winging it. But after that, see if you can get it into a system, because if you don't have a system, you can't have a team. If you don't have a team, you can't have a dream. Really, you can't sell something that doesn't have systems. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I'm forgetting the author's name, but he wrote a great book about constraints.
Hmm.
So as a creative entrepreneur, I often, don't like constraints. 'Cause I'm like, maybe there's a better way of doing it. And maybe there is a better way of doing it. But if you put something into a system, then you can test it, you can make it strong, you can empower your team, and then you can see if you can improve things. But don't be too crazy. I don't know, maybe your audience is not um, so many startup entrepreneurs like me, but people like me need to be told, stop changing things.
Well,
Just because you have a good idea doesn't mean that it's worth doing. And so I need to um, um, be careful not to give my team 10 new ideas to do this week. Maybe do one because the new idea could be just bright, shiny object syndrome. Maybe it is a good idea, but how much it has to be a lot better than what you're doing to be worthwhile because it could go the other way. So a little bit of discipline and then turning things into systems and then giving your the people who are going to inherit your company or inherit your legacy more autonomy to
mhm.
test things because if they're just doing what you tell them to, their heart's not in it.
And
I
they're not
mean,
seeing the process.
yeah.
I
And
what
then
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
sorry.
No,
Well,
you
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say that what I love about your answer is that if somebody can see, I want to call it the war room, could be the locker room. I'm throwing out metaphors on this lovely Friday. But when they can see what it's like inside of the office suite, maybe that's the best metaphor. Then they
Yeah.
can see that it's like, yes, the founder, the wealth creator, came up with 10 ideas, and
Yeah.
that's what happens in order to be great and to be good at what it is you want to do and to stay great. You're going to be coming up with 10 ideas, and it's a never ending process of creativity and a growth mindset, and you're not resting on your laurels, and this is what it takes to be successful. Time in.
Yeah, Richard Branson actually always carries a journal with him and he's always writing ideas. He has a discipline of
Mhm.
writing down new ideas every day. One of
Mhm.
my friends rented their beautiful multi-million dollar chalet in Whistler, which is a ski resort in Canada, to him, and he had left behind one of his notebooks filled with little ideas. So yeah, consider a habit of ideas. Uh, they can be worth a lot. Like I did have a good idea this week. Maybe I'll tell you about it a bit later. I'm like, wow, I could just double my revenue stream, but also double or 10x the value that I'm providing. So
Mhm.
when I'm thinking of ideas, which is a good thing I think, is just challenge yourself. Have you just solved a problem and how can you solve that same problem for somebody else or
Mhm.
train somebody else how to solve the problem? And that's a good way to add value, which adding value is part of your legacy.
Very cool. Many people understand how financial investments compound over time, but fewer think
Yes.
of legacy IP or intellectual property the same way. How can ideas become appreciating assets that generate both financial returns as well as influence for decades?
Mm. Well, let's look at Marie Kondo's book as an example of this. So she's got a couple of books about the joy of tidying up. Don't know, you probably remember Marie Kondo's this little petite Japanese woman. Uh,
I do know who she is, but only because I love organization and I'm kind of like this clean freak.
Okay, she's right up your alley. Okay, so she's a little petite Japanese woman. She pretty much always wears just white, so that's her clean brand. And the joy of tidying up, her two books like just took off. They became really, really popular. But here are the monetization things. And even if she is dead, not wishing that, but when she's passed on, this could still continue. So because so many people are like, oh, we love your particular way of folding clothes. We love your way of thinking through, tidying up. She has this thing where you hold something to your heart and
Mhm.
see if it sparks joy or not.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't spark joy, then it's time to give it away or recycle it. But you do so with gratitude. So you say thank you, t-shirt or whatever. And so she's got this whole the thing around it. Anyway, people liked it so much that they wanted to become certified Marie Kondo coaches so that
Mhm.
they could be um, in integrity using her method. Okay, so then she allows people, I think the training is something like $2,000, but then it's $500 a year to keep your certification current. Well, it doesn't take that many people to be a seven-figure business. She's got a very nice seven-figure business, which when she passes, her heirs could carry it on, right? Because the book, the systems, the processes, the certification, the membership, that is intellectual property. But see, she thought through, she went beyond just the book. She's like, oh, okay, now people want to be trained, so we'll certify them. And we want to make sure that they, keep on top of things. So we'll have an annual membership. Maybe she has events or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, then the other thing she did was a couple of documentary specials. So she had a Netflix special about hoarding. You know how people are so fascinated about the people who can't even walk in their home anymore because they've got newspapers from a decade ago.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with trauma, but keep going.
Yeah. So she got a Netflix series, even though she doesn't speak English.
Mm, mm,
So there was a Japanese translator with her, and she would go in and she would coach the people, and you would see kind of like it's the transformation economy. You would see a big
mm.
transformation. So it's not
Red
just about the
eyes.
information about what to do to tidy up. We got to watch vicariously these people having the transformation from hellhole to, oh, that place looks good now.
Mm.
Um, so she monetized that way as well. So if she hadn't written a book, if she hadn't systematized this, if she hadn't thought through, different ways to monetize her message, none of that value would have been captured. She could have been one person helping a dozen people tidy up, every month.
Yeah, I think
Instead,
yeah, I think
instead
that's
she's helping millions. Sorry.
yeah. I think it's great because it goes to the power of our intellect and creativity can come from anytime, anywhere. Like you had mentioned regarding Richard Branson and his notebook. I think Janet Jackson carries a tape recorder around, and so sometimes we think, oh, we've just got to delegate all of our financial assets to some fiduciary or some a financial planner, and that's the way where our money can make money. We don't always think about, oh, a book, something that
Yeah.
for like you had said, $20 ballpark could be that thing that catches fire and gets goes viral and gets turned into that television program or Netflix series that streams and
And it can last for hundreds of years,
mm-hmm.
like the Wizard of Oz,
Mm-hmm.
which was published over 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And initially it was serialized, like it was little stories that would come out in the newspaper. So there were many Wizard of Oz stories by L. Frank Baum. But then the spin on it, Wicked, right? So Wicked, huge hit. And then they have more Wicked movies. And now you've got all kinds of merchandise as well. So once you capture intellectual property that can make money for, oh, well, forever is a bit of an exaggeration, but for an extremely long time,
It's
right?
also interesting, before I go on to the next question, there was, I can't think of the podcast name. The attorney has been a guest on this platform. I think it was like the Dead Celebrities podcast, and then he changed the name because that wasn't very
Wasn't catchy enough. It's a little morose.
But when he talked about celebrities like Tom Petty, Marilyn Monroe, et cetera, all across the board, actors, musicians, et cetera, and what happens is many people just think about an estate when it comes to real property or personal property. But then you
Mhm.
open up this whole other world when it comes to intellectual property, like Michael Jackson or the Beatles. You got
Michael
record,
Jackson.
right?
Mhm.
And it's like, wow. So yeah, it's to somebody it could just be, oh, I'll publish a book for $20. But when somebody, like, I think we had set the intention of what if your legacy could be 10 times bigger than your wildest dreams. You
Yeah.
mentioned the condo, and then what happens if not only does it solve a problem, but it solves a problem for many people.
Yeah. Well, and circling back to Mel Robbins, who we touched on earlier, right? She was in such a desperate time on the verge of bankruptcy. She confessed to being on the verge of divorce, on the verge of alcoholism, like things
Mhm.
were not going well. But
Mhm.
because she shared that story, and then shared the book, The 5 Second Rule, which she self-published initially.
Mhm.
And then, he went on to other blockbuster best-selling books. She then had a TV show. Now, the Mel Robbins podcast, I think it's in the top 0.01% of podcasts. Like she's the top 15 podcasts in the world last time I checked.
Which is so great because everyone knew Tony Robbins and who was Mel Robbins.
Yeah, and it's a woman. Yay, we need more female voices. So that entire trajectory would never have happened if she hadn't been authentic and willing to share her story
Mhm.
and even willing to, borrow NASA's 54321. So for everybody listening to this, I really challenge, like, what are you doing? What are your struggles? And can you find a moment where things improve for you? Because that moment might be a legacy moment, right?
Yeah, I think it's the humanity. Like, don't
Hmm.
tell us why you're perfect. Tell us
Exactly.
when you went inside of your car and screamed. Okay, if someone listening has built a successful life and business but hasn't yet captured the wisdom they could leave behind, what are the first three steps they could begin today for their words to turn into lasting wealth, Angela?
Okay. Well, I think the first step is actually read the book Turn Words into Wealth. You can get it for free at turnwordsintowealth.com. I know that sounds self-serving, but honestly, I put in decades of expertise into it, and it'll give you 7 different models to monetize your message and the 10 steps you need to do to launch as a thought leader. And it's free. You just cover shipping at turnwordsintowealth.com. So I would start by learning. So or listen to podcasts, learn, but then lean into what are the problems that you have solved in your life, especially the difficult ones. So make a list of the problems that confronted you, those mad midnight moments, and did you manage to overcome those problems? Because if you have not overcome the problems, that's what you need to work on next. But if you have overcome the problems, like me launching the Grief Coach Academy, for example, I solved the problem for myself first. How am I going to overcome grief? How am I going to be a good mother to my 4-year-old son all by myself? And then when I learned how to do that, and then I started helping people one at a time, and then 2 people in the same week said, can you teach me? Because you helped me more than my therapist. That's a sign. So, where are those moments for you that you've already done something? And then, if you have solved a problem for yourself and then solved it for a few other people, this could be your clue. That could be the next big thing, like Mel Robbins 54321. And that's all the evidence you need. Solve it for yourself, solve it for a couple other people, and then turn it into a book or a video or a podcast or a YouTube and roll it out and see how the market responds. Mel Robbins can be used as an example a second time because she has a book that came out last year called The Let Them Theory.
Which is very controversial.
Yeah, oh, I want to hear what you think about that. But just to kind of finish the story, she first posted a short video about the let them theory. And then she got so much response that she's like, oh, well, this is really a thing. She did a podcast about the let them theory, and then that blew up. And then she wrote the book with her daughter, The Let Them Theory, which took a year. And then it became, a blockbuster bestseller. Okay, so you get to talk about the controversy behind it.
Oh, and then I'll ask you about your legacy before we close out. I think some people had said in response, well, do you just let them? And I
Hmm.
think she was kind of detached by saying you don't have to react to everything. You don't have to
Hmm.
take it personally. And there was some feedback I read online of, but then do you just let them get away with it? I don't know. Some people say like let go and let God, and some people don't believe that God's going to show up and show justice in this lifetime.
I like the let go and let God. The book it's a good book and it's a useful tool, but just because you have a hammer doesn't mean everything is a nail.
Mhm.
Right? So it's just one tool. But I like the idea of just try that on. You don't have to react to everything. You don't have to you live your life,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to live everybody else's life. In fact, that would be impossible.
I think it's I'm interrupted again.
Go ahead.
I think it's brilliant what she said because we do have to live our own life. And if we
Yeah.
don't take care of our square, that time disappears. And if we get
Yeah.
caught up in other people's drama, then we are not developing ourselves because it's so easy and nobody's going to check us or hold us accountable to our own personal development,
Yeah.
or very few.
I like what Byron Katie says about it. I'm going to paraphrase, but she basically says, you know, um, if you give your power away to the other people, then you're a slave.
Mhm.
So if we allow other people to hold our happiness, we're enslaved to their opinion. That's not good. Anyway, I like the book, The Let Them Theory, but it's only one tool to have in your emotional well-being toolkit, for sure. Yeah.
I asked this question at the end of every podcast. I asked it last time. I'm not sure if your answer has changed since then. In 1 to 2 sentences, what would you like your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that Aurora Winter was the person who helped me get my $1 million message and share it with the world.
Wonderful. Do you still have the same 3 to 4 core values, and would you be willing to share today?
I don't remember what I said last time, but I think my core values are creativity, contribution, and connection.
Very cool. Very cool. Before I close this out, is there a good website, or would you like to hold up the book one more time?
Okay, can hold up the book. My website is actually samepagepublishing.com. So if people want help and want support with their $1 million message, they can go to samepagepublishing.com and it has a link so you can get Turn Words into Wealth as well, or you can take a deeper dive and sign up for a call with me.
Wonderful. We started out today's episode with that intention of what if your legacy could be 10 times bigger than your wildest dreams. And I was trying to weave what it is regarding launching thought leaders and authors into some of the present day problems when it comes to legacy preservation,
Yeah,
intellectual capital, family governance, succession, intergenerational wealth transfer, because there is a lot that individuals know and they don't even realize that they know it, but also they have to be willing to set aside some time to
hmm,
write it down, even if
yeah.
it's in that Richard Branson type of notebook.
Or better yet, be interviewed because most people can talk 8 times faster than they can write.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And to call you up and to go to your website.
there you go.
Okay. So I'm just going to circle back one more time. Some of the key points that you brought up is that AI really cannot compete with your wisdom and your stories. So take the time to write down the irreplaceable assets. And you brought up 4 of them, but one of them is one's stories of their life. And
Mhm.
that, like you had said, people remember much more. You had drawn a parallel to the stories of the Bible. We might not remember the list of the 10, but how many lists of 10 do we remember? We can't even remember a grocery list these days unless we write it down. But that story, oh my goodness, yeah, that it and that's, I think, even from a human nature standpoint, we shared stories at a campfire, back in ancient times, and it's no different if the campfire now is our screens,
Yeah.
for instance. And you had mentioned, that there is a standard operating procedure, and only you know it. So, and just like your pain, and you talked about the hand, the front and the back side of the hand, loss as well as love, that the standard operating procedure can come from moments of pain, but with that comes the breakthrough, and that's what viewers, listeners, the human population today needs. That's what society needs today. They need the answers. And yes, absolutely, we can be aware of AI, and it can take out the middle, it can take out the commodities, but it cannot take out what it is: your wisdom, your stories, your knowledge, your TI, your time in. And
Mhm.
yeah, what are those problems that only you solved in your life? Because someone else needs to know that you've been there and you have made it through and you have transformed. So thank you very much, Aurora, today.
Thank you so much. This was great.
So, to any of the listeners as well as viewers out there, if you are tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, et cetera, as well as YouTube, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. And if you feel so inclined, send an email to either Aurora Winter or myself and let us know your thoughts and feelings about today's conversation. So, thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Aurora, for speaking once again into your legacy.